The Columbia Broadcasting System and its affiliated stations present Orson Welles and the Mercury Theater on the Air in The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells.
Ladies and gentlemen, here is the latest bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News. It is reported that at 8:50 p.m., a huge flaming object, believed to be a meteorite, fell on a farm in the neighborhood of Grover's Mill, New Jersey, 22 miles from Trenton. The flash in the sky was visible within a radius of several hundred miles, and the noise of the impact was heard as far north as Elizabeth. We have dispatched a special mobile unit to the scene, and we'll have our commentator, Carl Phillips, give you a word picture of the scene as soon as we can reach
What's happening here?
In the meantime...
On this date 50 years ago, on the night before Halloween, the world came to an end. At least that's the way it seemed to many people who heard this broadcast. That night, October 30th, 1938, 6 million CBS radio listeners heard Orson Welles and his Mercury Theater on the Air in a dramatization of The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. As many as 1 million of those listeners believed that they were hearing news reports of an actual invasion from the planet Mars.
Mike, you boy, we've got to get out of the country!
John Rieger has the story of the legendary panic broadcast.
Orson Welles called The War of the Worlds a Halloween prank.
We know now that in the early years of the 20th century, this world was being watched closely by intelligences greater than man's, and yet as mortal as his own. We know now that as human beings busied themselves...
In the fall of 1938, Welles and Houseman were preoccupied with a new play and had little time for their CBS radio series. The Edgar Bergen Show dominated the ratings in their 8 p.m. Sunday time slot. The Mercury Theater on the Air couldn't even attract a sponsor. Houseman had been pounding out the weekly scripts for the shows. Welles directed and starred. They needed a writer, and they brought in a promising young playwright named Howard Koch. His third assignment was War of the Worlds. It was a daunting project. To tell the story in a series of news bulletins as Welles wanted would mean virtually an original play. Driving home from his father's house in New Jersey on Monday, Koch had less than a week to lay out a Martian invasion.
Guys, listen to this!
Of its surface.
I say, do you still think it's a meteor, Professor?
I don't know what to think. The metal casing is definitely extraterrestrial. Not found on this Earth. Friction of the Earth's atmosphere usually tears holes in a meteorite. The thing is smooth, and you can see its cylindrical
Just a minute.
shape.
Something's happening. Ladies and gentlemen,
What was that?
This end of the thing is beginning to flake off. The top is beginning to rotate like a screw, and the thing must be hollow. Move it! Keep back there! Keep back there! Keep those men back! Keep back there! Keep those idiots back!
Every phone began ringing at once, and everybody was hysterical. So after about 10, 15 minutes of this, I got somebody in the control room. And I said, hey, would you tell Orson Welles that people are taking this thing seriously, and they better put on a disclaimer.
We've got to get out of here. What about my things? Forget your things. Let's get out of here.
William Paley was the founder and president of CBS.
I was at home playing cards, and these telephone calls were coming in. And they wouldn't say what they wanted, but they would want to talk to Mr. Paley or whoever was president of CBS. And I'd say, these people are calling up to make some complaints. I get these all the time, and I'm sick and tired of them. And I got this call from my office saying, oh, Mr. Paley, a terrible thing has happened. And there it was, the whole country was bursting wide open.
Wait a minute, something's happening. Humped shape is rising out of the pit. I can make out a small beam of light against a mirror. There's a jet of flame springing from the mirror that leaps right at the advancing men. It strikes them head on. Oh, Lord, they're turning into flames. Now the whole field's caught up by the woods, the barns, the gas tanks of the automobiles.
A lot of people see things which I had never seen before.
Hallucinations, no less.
Yeah, sure.
But it was a pure question of stark, naked fear.
Fantastic scene. Hundreds of cars are parked in the field. In fact, the police are trying to rope off the roadway leading into the farm, but it's no use. They're breaking right through. Car's headlights throw an enormous spotlight on the pit where the object's half buried. Now, some of the more daring souls now are venturing near the edge.
Cast members, on the other hand, unanimously maintain there was no way to know what would happen. But there had already been hints of the surprising power of radio, which War of the Worlds so spectacularly demonstrated.
The ability of radio to create this kind of psychotic effect certainly was a demonstration of its ubiquity and its penetrability and its power. Radio, after all, unlike any other medium, would get inside homes and inside automobiles. It would be in the bedroom and the living room and in the laundry room. The printed word has to be circulated. If it's a newspaper, it has to be sold. It has to reach its subscribers. So the effect of it is spread out over hours, perhaps days. But radio is instantaneous. It is that speed and the simultaneousness of its transmission that makes any such phenomenon almost immeasurably deeper in its effect.
Newspaper accounts, social historians of the day certainly will attest to the fact that there was an unease as people worried about the events that were happening in Europe. It was not that they were anticipating an attack from the Germans or the Italians. It was not that they were anticipating some imminent event, and yet there was this general feeling of unease. When an event can occur that can help to explain that unease, people jump to it. And on the Halloween Eve of 1938, an event did occur.
Broadcasting building. I'm speaking from the roof of Broadcasting Building, New York City. The bells you hear are ringing to warn the people to evacuate the city as Martians approach. Estimated in the last 2 hours, 3 million people have moved out along the roads to the north. This may be the last broadcast. We'll stay here to the end. Wait a minute, the enemy is now in sight above the Palisades.
I am disappointed in the gullibility of the American people politically, as well as in this instance, that they accept the most outrageous things as truths.
The panic had one immediate effect on broadcast policy. Interruptions for fictional news bulletins were out. The Mercury Theater on the Air, however, suddenly found itself with a sponsor, Campbell's Soup. For Howard Koch, John Houseman, and Orson Welles, the panic broadcast was a ticket to Hollywood.
This is Orson Welles, ladies and gentlemen. Out of character, to assure you that the War of the Worlds has no further significance than as the holiday offering it was intended to be. The Mercury Theater's own radio version of dressing up in a sheet and jumping out of a bush and saying boo. Starting now, we couldn't soap all your windows and steal all your garden gates. By tomorrow night, so we did the best next thing. We annihilated the world before your very ears and utterly destroyed the CBS. You will be relieved, I hope, to learn that we didn't mean it and that both institutions are still open for business. So goodbye, everybody, and remember, please, for the next day or so, the terrible lesson you learned tonight. That grinning, glowing, globular invader of your living room is an inhabitant of the pumpkin patch, and if your doorbell rings and nobody's there, that was no Martian. It's Halloween.